The very next thing after the shot heard round the world that the embattled farmers fired at Lexington was Ethan Allen's peremptory summons to this fortress in grey of that morning of May, and of the liberty in the words that passed into history and became immortal because they were part of an immortal deed.
The shots fired at Lexington set into motion events from which there was no going back. From this point on, peace was unachievable and war was necessary. The Second Continental Congress, which assembled in Philadelphia on May 10, 1775, found itself forced to turn from embargoes and petitions to the problems of organizing, directing, and supplying a military effort. Morale was high after Lexington conquered, creating a patriotic fervor that boosted the colonies into the war. In this excited and tumultuous aftermath, under the advice of both Benedict Arnold and John Brown, a company was made ready to take Fort Ticonderoga by the Connecticut Committee of Correspondence. Brown was a spy from Massachusetts and conducted intelligence operations in the surrounding area prior to the start of the war. He had found that the fort was only lightly garrisoned and was located in an extremely strategic position on Lake Champlain. Based on these findings, he urged the Massachusetts Committee of Safety to take the fort.
One thing I must mention, to be kept as a profound secret: the fort at Ticonderoga must be seized as soon as possible, should hostilities be committed by the King's troops.
Arnold, who was familiar with the country surrounding Ticonderoga, had also noticed the importance of the fort, remembering that it still housed dozens of cannons. These cannon could be used to help the troops massing outside of Boston to dislodge the British. Arnold was given permission by the Massachusetts Committee to raise a company of men to take the fort. While recruiting men, Arnold learned of another group intent on capturing the fort: Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. The Green Mountain Boys were a group of colonials that had settled in the New Hampshire Grants, an area of land between New Hampshire and New York, which would become the state of Vermont very soon after. They were perhaps the first militia group in the colonies, forming as a result of Britain's grant of their land to the state of New York. They were a semi-organized group of men that desired to remain independent from New York and keep their land. Many of the boys had family members in the group and knew the rest well. This had great implications on the nature of the group and how it operated. A group that was so familiar with each other was likely to be less professional and more casual in the way they acted. However, this familiarity also bred a deep loyalty. Also, a common cause had united them much earlier than many of the other militias beginning to spring up. They had resisted the claims of New York through burning houses and acts of mild terrorism for the 5 years leading up to the Revolution under the leadership of Ethan Allen. Thus, they were perhaps the most organized militia at the outbreak of the war. Allen and the Green Mountain Boys were interested in the revolutionary cause because it would invalidate Britain's grant of the area to New York. This would save their land and allow them to create their own independent colony. Allen and the boys, like Brown and Arnold, had noticed the dilapidated state of the fort as well as its strategic position and supplies. They recognized the influence they would command from a fort on the border of the encroaching New York, as well as the blow it would deal to the Crown in controlling the grants. The boys received permission from the Connecticut Assembly for an expedition to take the fort. By May 7th, Allen had gathered about 200 men and was positioned a few miles from Ticonderoga. Arnold learned of this as he was recruiting men for his own expedition. He believed the decision to take the fort was his idea, and he felt he deserved credit for its capture. He immediately left the men he was recruiting and set off to find the Green Mountain Boys. Arnold believed that he had the jurisdiction to lead the attack force. The Green Mountain Boys, however, would not accept any claim from the Massachusetts Committee. They had been loosely organized for the past 5 years under Ethan Allen, who shared their plight in terms of land. In their minds, they had no reason to give up command to this new stranger, in spite of the fact that he outranked Allen. Also, Allen desired the heroism that taking the fort would bring, and in the end, both men agreed to share the command. Had Arnold been denied from the expedition, it would have lost one of the greatest strategic minds of the Revolutionary era. Arnold would later prove invaluable for the maintenance of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga. The expedition began at 11:30 on May 9th, on the same day Allen arrived. The Green Mountain Boys reached Hans Cove around 1:30 in the morning, about 230 men strong, and prepared to cross Lake Champlain. They only had 2 boats with which to complete the crossing, and Allen and Arnold decided to split the force and take 83 men in the first boatload and then as many as possible of the remaining troops on the second trip. However, dawn was approaching and the troops of the second crossing could not be waited for, as the first crossing had taken most of the night. They needed to attack immediately. They entered the fort on the south side. The fort was manned only by 42 British soldiers. Allen later documented the capture.
I found a sentry posted, who instantly snapped his fusee at me. I ran immediately toward him, and he retreated through the covered way into the parade within the garrison, gave a halloo, and ran under the bomb-proof.
Once inside, Allen demanded to be told where the commander of the fort was quartered. He then immediately rapped on the door of the commander, William de la Place, and called for the surrender of the fort.
When I ordered him to deliver me the fort instantly, he asked me by what authority I demanded it. I answered him, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress."